Hello and welcome. I'm excited that you're here. My name is E.Lee, and we have been in a very exciting 4-part series entitled Conscious Beyond Belief, Our Journey into Knowing. And in it, we have been taking this journey beyond religious dogma and belief structures into what I like to call the divine lifeblood of direct knowing. And so this really is about taking the training wheels off of our spiritual path, transcending the rules of religious dogma and living our lives informed by a personal, intimate connection with the divine. So before I go on, I want to differentiate. There's a difference between transcending the rules and being anti-rule. So being anti-rule is very similar to the whole teenage rebellion thing. Those of us that have teenagers or have been teenagers know about this desire just to be against the rules for the sake of being against the rules. Whereas this is more about transcending the rules. So people that move into this spiritual realm of direct knowing are usually people that know already how to play by the book, or how to follow the rules and how to do that well first. So I love the Dalai Lama. Had the opportunity to go and see him once, and I think that humor is really part of his theology, and he has something really great to say about this. And he says that know the rules well so that you can break them effectively. And I think that's really what we're talking about here. So this is not a path for everybody. There are some people that actually still need to live at the level of the rules. And so when I think about these people, it reminds me of my friend Melissa in college. I was beginning to look for different types of churches and religious communities, and I found the whole New Thought Unity community, and I really loved it because it really told me that I am a divine being, and I'm not part of the whole original sin thing, that I was born really in harmony and in likeness to the divine, and many others of these types of things that were different from traditional religion. And I remember my friend Melissa saying, well, I just could never go to a church like that because I need to be spanked. And I remember thinking, I really don't need to be spanked at this point in my life. And so we kind of parted ways as far as, our religious pursuits were concerned. But there are people that do need to follow the rules. And so part of this exploration is not making that bad and wrong, but, understanding where you are in that journey. So who is direct knowing for? Who is that path for? And I would say it's for evolutionaries, for visionaries, and for those that are really inspired to live in direct partnership with the evolutionary impulse. And then if you do that, you will really know, when we look at these various structures that we're inside of right now, what needs to change, how it needs to change, and you will have the wisdom really to partner with what is coming next, what is evolving next, and doing that consciously. So I have been working, with the beautiful work of Cynthia Bourgeault, and she talks about this is really living in a completely different realm for the most part. It really has that in the world but not of the world type of quality to it. And there is a beautiful spiritual freedom and a power that goes along with that. And she says several times in her work, but it will cost you everything. And very often we do not recognize the level of surrender into love that this path, really requires. But you can really feel that you can feel the power and the freedom in that if you can really achieve that level of surrender. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So how would we go about beginning such a journey into direct knowing? So with our Conscious Beyond Belief series, we have 4 different parts, and there are videos actually on each one of these parts that my husband Jim Lee has done, and you can find that on YouTube as well. The first one is entitled The Allurement of Knowing. The second one is The Three Faces of God. The third one is The Interdimensional I. And the fourth one is the one that we'll be speaking about today, which is Relational Selfhood. So I want to kind of break down each of these just a little bit so you can see how they fit into the whole. So week one is The Allurement of Knowing. And so just personally, whenever I am trying to do something different, particularly as it relates to my spiritual path, I always like to tap into the universal power of allurement. And this is something that I came to understand from the work of Brian Swim with his 12 powers of the universe. And allurement is the gravitational pull from the physical standpoint of how the universe came into form from the Big Bang. But from the spiritual standpoint, it is really this draw that is always present whenever there's something that you are desiring, that the universe is actually desiring it for you equally. And so, part of learning to manifest consciously is being in connection with this particular power so that you can always feel that you're not out there wanting something, totally on your own, that whatever you are pursuing or wanting to get into more, the universe already is there wanting that equally and providing all of the support that you need. So that's the first step, is to really tune into that beautiful love that is the foundation of the universe that already has you, already has your back, as you're taking on new tasks. So that was week one. And week two, we talked about the three faces of God, which is very much in Paul Smith's work. And he has a book by that same title. And it invites us really to know that we can look at God from a variety of different perspectives and angles, that there are many faces to God, actually. And he speaks to three of them: the intimate face of God, the infinite face of God, and the inner face of God. So we have a first-person relationship with the divine, the I Am. We also have a second-person relationship, a beloved relationship with the divine. And then we have this third person, this really large, immense relationship with the divine. So this is an invitation really into not necessarily thinking that there are only three ways that we can know God, but begins to help us to really tap into, allowing the universe and allowing love to really be with us in a way that we are always expanding and always increasing the way that we understand and know God personally. So week three, we talked about the interdimensional I. And so just like there are many faces of God, there are many dimensions of how we see ourselves, how we make meaning of the world. And that is really has a lot to do with the power of identity. When we say the term I am, we are letting the world know, what our perspective is. And ultimately, it has to do with, how we are really looking at love and what's possible there. So we looked at three lenses, basically. And it was the I am of matter, and that's identifying with your physical body. And it also includes the Newtonian worldview, which we're going to talk about a little bit more today. And the next I am is the I am of personality. And that if you're familiar with the Enneagram or many of these other personality types of categorizations, it falls into that way of being, characteristics of the personality, the mind, how you are feeling, belief structures, all of this fit into this particular I am, or this lens on the world. And then the third one is the I am of spirit. And so this is identifying with your more expanded self, the self that you were before you incarnated and that you will still be when you leave this planet. And there are many beautiful possibilities there. And within that, we talked about miracles, the I am of miracles. and how to begin to step outside of what we really think is possible, outside of those limitations, and into the larger possibility that's always available to us in the universe. And so today we're going to be speaking about relational selfhood. So that really is adding another I am, the I am of relationality, to the mix. And so what I would like to do actually before we get into relational selfhood is to really make a case, first of all, for the ego and individuation. Because with the first three I ams, it's really the more of the individuated self, and we're getting ready to step into the self that's in relationship. But there's this tendency when we're moving forward or moving, into more expanded areas to think that, one is better than the other. And so I just wanted to make a case first for the ego. And you probably have heard this saying that you can only transcend a healthy ego. And this is really something that's important. Back in the 80s, we used to, talk about the ego in terms of it should be killed off, it's bad and wrong, and only the spiritual part of ourselves is the most valid part. And you may have noticed, if you've been on this path for a while, there's now different types of teachings that are helping us to integrate the ego instead of making it bad and wrong, and developing the spiritual muscle where we have an ego, but it doesn't have to rule us. And there is a discernment that goes along with that, and a spiritual skill that you can develop so that the more expanded parts of yourself are really in charge. But at the same time, we can really move into a more embodied way of being with ourselves, which does include the ego. So the next one, which really is a corollary to the first one here, is you can only live as your relational self if you are fully individuated. So very often when we think about individuation or individuals, we think automatically of separation. And this is the mistake. We don't want to naturally equate being individuated with being separate. And in fact, as we're moving forward into relationality, the fact that we are so gloriously and beautifully unique is such a key part to how we will create relationship with others and with the planet itself moving forward. And another way I think to think about individuation is to really value diversity. And diversity in terms of evolution is absolutely critical to being able to move forward. And in fact, the greatest leaps that the universe has ever made from an evolutionary standpoint are when very diverse elements come together. So it's not only having, being with like-minded people all the time and, being within your comfort zone with that, but really valuing, each person's uniqueness and seeing its value to the whole. So Thomas Berry says, diversity is magic. It is the first manifestation, the first beginning of the differentiation of a thing and of simple identity. The greater the diversity, the greater the perfection. I love that. So now we're going to move into this idea of relational selfhood. And before we totally get into that, though, I want to go back to the I ams, and particularly the I am of matter, or the Newtonian viewpoint. So most of us are familiar with what Jeff Carrera calls the things in space paradigm. And so that means basically we look at our world and we see that there are various things, and in between things or between people is empty space. And most of the time we have our focus on what the things are, and we think that nothing is happening in the empty space. And so if you looked around the room right now, you probably would kind of see things pretty much like that, because it's a very dominant view in our culture right now. And in this view, pretty much you are the primary doer. There's this sense that if you don't make it happen, nothing is going to occur. And that everything else, you are the subject and everything else basically is the object. And another part of this view is there's such a thing as animate objects and inanimate objects. some things that have the life force, things that do not have the life force. And so my question to you with all of that is, what if there's another way to see the universe? So when I was a little girl, everything in my bedroom was alive. Everything was animate. Everything had a personality. In fact, as I think back now, the lamp in my room, and I can still remember what it looked like, what it smelled like. It was alive. And there was a sense also that everything kind of communicated with me, that there was some type of an exchange there. There was a knowingness. And this was true also outside, going in my backyard. I still remember my relationship with my apple tree, which was, amazing. There was some type of an essence to essence type of a communication there. Sometimes it was verbal, sometimes it was not verbal, but there was a sense of that I knew my apple tree, at a level of depth, and felt also that I was known. So it wasn't, just one way. And I felt with that I could speak like I could really tell the story of my apple tree. So I have spoken about this idea of being able to tell another story before. And basically, you can tell another story if you really understand them at the level of essence, that you can see them in all of their I ams, the I am of personality, the I am of matter, the I am of spirit, that you can really behold them beyond this particular incarnation. You have the ability when you speak that you can speak as them or on their behalf, because you're coming from such a deep sense of essence of who they are. And so I can say that, based on that, like my whole universe as a child was really enchanted, because it was kind of these ongoing conversations that were always happening, and the fact that everything was really alive. And within this mutuality, of exchange, there was not a sense of me being the primary doer. I had to make everything happen. Like there were other ways or other types of agency that I was constantly being with. So it was a beautiful way to live. Like the whole universe basically is an enchanted place. And then I went to school. So going to school was kind of this indoctrination into the Newtonian worldview, or the things in space, where you have animate objects and inanimate objects. And there's this blank, empty space between them where nothing is basically happening. But then Marianne Williamson has this saying, which I always love, that fiction is the place where we get to tell the truth. And so I like how you can look and see in culture where there are things arising, like in the movies or books, where, your intellect will tell you, well, that's just fictitious. But then you understand that something also is happening on another level. So there are these movies, a series of movies that came out, you may remember, called Toy Story. I think there's some like 3 or 4 of them or other. And that's another sign where there's, all these sequels where we have to continue to live in this idea that, toys can come to life at night when you're not looking. And the museum movies that Ben Stiller did, I think there's a couple of those as well, where the museum wax figures come to life at night. And so, there's this kind of theme that is, seeping into culture. That maybe, the things in space or the Newtonian view is only one possible way of seeing the universe. And maybe it's not even the most exciting one. So I'm inviting us into this idea now to play with, that the universe really is alive, is animate, and in constant relationship with itself. Although science actually is beginning to come around to this idea, and we can see this in quantum physics, where at the subatomic level, everything is moving. There's no such thing as a static object in the universe if you look at the subatomic level. And everything's in a relationship, and it doesn't really matter. It could be two atoms on the other side of the universe from each other, and they still are in relationship and having an impact. And we can even see, like, science is proving that, the chair that you're sitting on has an impact on you. Like it's in the way of sharing some type of an information, with you. Even what's going on in our biome of our gut, the bacteria in there are in conversation and are actually have the ability to affect how we think, how we feel, and even in what we believe in. They're even saying that what happened at the Big Bang, is continuing to affect us. So everything is really in constant conversation. So even the chair that you're sitting in right now is impacting what you're going to decide will be your next meal. So this invitation is to live into the awareness of that level of interaction and mutuality of exchange. So in that way, my next question to you is, who is the primary doer in your life? If you're really living in this level of mutual exchange, there becomes a different type of way that we are, a different type of agency, I would say, that we are being invited to engage in with ourselves personally, that has a really high awareness of everything that is around us, of everything that is alive, and how everything is influencing everything else. And so Bioakomolafe has this beautiful term called posthumanism. And so posthumanism is giving up the notion of human beings as the center of the universe, the primary agent, and to see the universe as a co-production of billions of living conversations, where there is perpetual mutual influence and agency. And so I'm going to invite you to take a look at our next slide that is really pretty much how we see people right now in the Newtonian worldview. And then the next slide, what if actually we could see people like this? So you can see in this second slide that this is just pure energy. And some of us actually do see people like this that can really read energy. But what if just in general we had this awareness of all of these conversations, all of this mutual exchange that was constantly happening? How would that inform how we navigate our life? So I have another question for you. What if soul is not just human? So I'm reading this really great book, which I love. It's called The Journey of Soul Initiation, a field guide for visionaries, evolutionaries, and revolutionaries by Bill Plotkin. And it's very inspiring. And, it talks about this idea of how we can undo outdated cultural messages and have a rebirth now that's really informed and drawn by the evolutionary impulse, and how to really be conscious in that, in service to sustainability, to a sustainable future for all the species that are here. It's very exciting. And part of this journey, again, with direct knowing, has to do with an inner understanding of our own mortality and immortality. And so very often, even our most precious beliefs are, kind of this willingness to have even those parts of ourselves on the chopping block as needed, letting the universe constantly redo us, is a kind of way of living with your own mortality, of not being afraid of that, to allow yourself to constantly be reborn and renewed. And the other piece with that is to understand your immortality, which means that you really know that there's a you that exists on the other side of whatever is falling apart. That there is a you that existed before you incarnated, that will still be in existence after you leave the planet, that is vibrant, that is alive and well. So part of this invitation of the direct knowing is to really live in conscious awareness of both our mortality and our immortality. But back to the question, what if soul is not just human? So Bill Plotkin says that soul is a person or thing's unique ecological niche in the Earth's community. He says that a thing's eco-niche, its soul, is what makes it what it is on the deepest, widest, and most natural level of identity. So in Bill Plotkin's view, soul exists in relationship. It exists really in this mutual exchange between things, between species, and between people. Something in that exchange that is so alive, that is so vibrant, is what he calls soul. Now, from a scientific viewpoint, the ecological niche of a species is its unique way of surviving long enough to evolve. And so the specific way that that particular species navigates the harsh elements of environment, finds food, finds ways of reproducing, is really what, from, I guess, the most material standpoint, we could call the ecological niche. And in many ways, humans have really done well with this. We have found a way, to satisfy all of the basic elements that our species needs to be able to survive and to evolve. But we haven't really mastered one of the main elements. And this one is collaboration. So most of us are familiar with Charles Darwin's work, and if I say the term survival of the fittest, we'll know exactly what that means. It kind of has this dog-eat-dog, type of connotation to it. But I remember having this really great conversation with Barbara Marx Hubbard, who pointed out that in his book, The Origin of Species, that love is used over 90 times. And we're not aware of that. And there, love is used in the context of relationship and collaboration. That species that have been able to evolve over time are those that have found ways to collaborate with others. And this is back to this diversity thing again, where we have different elements coming together to produce an evolutionary leap moving forward. So this idea of collaboration is very foundational to survival of a species. But not only that, at this point, learning how to help the entire planet survive. So we really need to be able to tell the story of the planet, to really understand its essence, and to live from this relational quality of what is happening between us, this mutual exchange. So the human ecological niche is really a willingness to return to the enchanted forest and remembering that all we are and everything around us is magic created before time. And we can really learn to tell the story of our planet and speak as the red rocks of the mountains, to speak as the acacia trees in the desert, and to speak as the stranger in the line at the grocery store. So I'd like to leave you with this affirmation, and then I invite you just to breathe it in and to take it into your heart. Rooted in the universal biome, I speak as love. Rooted in the universal biome, I speak as love. Thank you so very much for joining me today. Blessings on your day.